I almost wonder, Nick, if there's like a hypothetical clock that starts on like Kevin and Andrew Berry's job security. Again, because we talk so much about how we think they're safe for this year, and I still largely stand by that. But if they put Dillon Gabriel out there and he struggles, is it so easy to just be like, well, hey, there's other circumstances, and like we talked about earlier, just making those excuses? Or is that almost the biggest indictment that there could be on Kevin Stefanski, is that even the quarterback you drafted still doesn't look good in this offense?
Yeah, that's what worries me a little bit. What I like to look at this glass half full and think that maybe there's a world where this just clicks, that it's Kevin's quarterback, that he kind of hand selected to run his offense his own way. But the Browns fan in me understands that, well, if things don't go great out the gate, how loud does the noise get about Kevin Stefanski and his inability to identify, draft, develop these project quarterbacks? Because, look, that's the other unfair thing that we're going to continue to do, because they're forcing us to cover this kid as if he could become a franchise quarterback. There are not many QBs that are starters in the league that weren't first or second round picks. Jalen Hurts was a second round pick. Dak Prescott was a third round pick. Outside of that, you're looking at a bunch of first round QBs. So Dillon Gabriel's already kind of uphill sledding, to live up to these expectations that are going to be unfairly placed on him to help the Browns win football games this year. And ultimately, if he does, and he's capable of doing it, and they turn this thing around, okay, sweet. Maybe he gets another crack at it next year, and maybe you could draft an offensive lineman in the first round and a receiver in the first round and try to make his life as easy as possible. But I think we all know the direction that this thing probably goes, and it's that Dillon Gabriel maybe is a slight upgrade from Joe Flacco, but ultimately still not great, especially because he is, again, a reminder, a third-round rookie, and then we are all really frustrated, and we don't know where to turn, and that's ultimately when the heat gets turned up on a head coach and a GM.
Well, and you mentioned, I think the way you worded it earlier in the show was is it a panic move if they start Dillon Gabriel, they pivot to Dillon Gabriel? And what sort of that question comes from is the idea that the Giants already made a switch at quarterback. They went to their rookie because things were not going well with Russell Wilson, and they didn't really, they needed a change there as well. But I think the difference there is, I think Brian Daboll knows that his job is very much on the line. And if they don't, when you have a rookie quarterback sort of waiting as a backup that you haven't deployed yet, that is the ultimate get out of jail free card, or the last it's the last thing you can play if you're worried about your job security as a coach is, hey, we got this rookie quarterback that we're really excited about, and if he turns things around, that's going to save my job because now they want to see what he can do next year. And so Stefanski basically doing the same thing with a player that they really liked. It makes me wonder if the same thing sort of applies here. But because we've talked so much about how we think that they're just going to run it back with these guys and they all get a mulligan, I don't know if the circumstances are exactly the same, but I could understand where a fan might look at it and say, okay, well, this is now his chance to prove this is your quarterback you wanted. This is the guy that you prioritized taking in the third round before Shedeur Sanders or anybody else. So if this doesn't work out, if you can't develop this guy, if he even looks bad, then what are we even doing here wasting our time with this coach and GM trying to draft and develop quarterbacks, because now he can't even develop the guy that he really liked. Right, because to me, another layer of this entire thing is that the offense has to start showing growth. Because and I don't think this is going to happen. They proved that they could win a game. They beat the Green Bay Packers, really good football team. But imagine they go through the rest of this season and the offense looks as hapless as it's looked, and it's unable to put up 20 points. It's a lot of Corey Bojorquez. How can you as ownership feel confident going into the NFL draft being like, this is a healthy system, this is a healthy environment for a rookie quarterback? Dillon Gabriel will provide a little bit of a litmus test towards, is this regime capable? Is this coaching staff
everybody included, like Billy Musgrave to Kevin Stefanski, like, is everybody here capable of developing a rookie quarterback and putting him in a good position to succeed? Like, I think a lot has been made about the external factors that go into starting a rookie, like the proper opponent. Doing it against the Brian Flores defense seems like a risk, but internally there are things that the Browns can do to make life easy on Dillon Gabriel. They could simplify the playbook. They could make sure the football is getting out of his hands very quickly by capitalizing on quick routes and those sort of things. Really lean on Quinshon Judkins in the run game. Like, there are things that the Browns could control to make life easy on Gabriel Sunday should he start. And I really think it'll be a little bit of a test for Kevin Stefanski. Like, is this an environment where a young quarterback can thrive? And if it's not, and if they fail that test, boy, could we be having an awkward conversation come January about trying to figure out what coach would be best suited to go into the NFL draft with 2 first-round picks.
Well, I think the trust question comes back. We talked so much this offseason about, do you trust Andrew Berry to be the one drafting your franchise quarterback? Do you trust him to see 2 more drafts and build this roster the right way? Up until the draft, I think the answer to that for many people was no. Now his draft class is performing at a high level, and I think more people would say, all right, maybe he deserves another chance to see if he can do inject another round of talent into this roster to get it going back on track. But if Dillon Gabriel goes out there and even he struggles and the offensive issues continue, again, you're running out of things that you can blame. You're running out of things that you can point to and say, well, this isn't Kevin Stefanski's fault. That isn't Kevin Stefanski's fault. This would be his guy in the same way that Jackson Dart is Brian Dable's guy. And it is kind of that last card he can play to try to save the offense and those types of things. Now, ultimately, I said it. I think both Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry are back in 2026. So I don't know that it starts a proverbial clock on them, because I think they're operating already under the premise, and I think Jimmy Haslam's operating already under the premise that they're probably going to be back next year, unless things go so poorly that Kevin loses the locker room and it's just untenable and they decide they got to move on. And maybe Dillon struggling would be part of that. But I think they are different situations. But I can understand for the fans why it would probably feel that way for some of them, that this would almost be like the last break glass in case of emergency option for Kevin Stefanski to maybe save his job if the quarterback he drafted actually performs at a high level. But if he stinks, it is going to be the biggest indictment on Kevin Stefanski.
And at the end of the day, though, I'm glad that they're not living in their fears. Like, I'm glad that they are deciding to go forward with Dillon Gabriel, because I think everything that we're saying here is true. Like, the pressure is going to be there for Stefanski and Gabriel to work, and kind of work in short order, because of how much, like, again, and they've done this to themselves. Like, this is the bed that they created, and now they've got to lay in it. Like, they inflated the tires on Dillon Gabriel all throughout camp, and his struggles and inconsistency there all throughout the preseason, where he was able to actually look good and move the ball and things of that nature. Like, you guys continually pump this kid up as if he was a first-round quarterback and as if he was a dude that was eventually going to take the keys to the franchise this season. So now that it's getting ready to happen, like, you're all liable for whatever happens on the field with this guy now. Like, I hope they understand that now that they've opened this can of worms, you can't really put the lid back on the can. Like, once Dillon Gabriel's out there, the book is going to be written about how he works in this offense, good or bad.
Yeah, it's a complicated situation just in general, because like we've talked about, making the switch to Gabriel makes sense to try to get the offense doing something different and looking a little bit better. But some of the same problems could ultimately end up persisting, especially if the offensive line struggles. That's not the best situation for a rookie to sort of step into. That could cause a whole lot of problems for him. And it could lead to him looking pretty bad for a stretch of games this season or throughout this season, depending on how long he plays. If you have to pivot back to Joe Flacco at some point, God forbid if that happens, there's just a lot that could go wrong. And I don't know that they'll probably get a pass, but I don't know if they necessarily should if this is the guy that you're banking on and this is the offense that you created and built. So there's just a lot of questions there. But I think that was a question, again, that sort of popped up organically that bears asking. Does starting Dillon Gabriel start a proverbial clock on Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry in terms of their job status? I do think there's another interesting question in here in relation to, like, if it goes poorly for Dillon Gabriel and you're sort of left in the later this season with like another quarterback decision, Is there a world where you go back to Flacco, and is there a world where he could like earn back the trust of fans? Like if it's not Flacco or if it's not Gabriel this weekend, if they give it one more week and Flacco goes out, maybe he doesn't play a great game, but he plays a decent game, protects the football, throws for like 200 or so yards and like a touchdown, and the Browns beat the Vikings. Because I think that's a scenario that could happen. This Vikings offensive line is atrocious right now, and Myles Garrett and company are going to just feast. Is there a world where like Flacco gains back the fans' trust and he maybe gets put back into the starting role at some point?
I don't know that he gains back the trust of the fans, just because until you go out there and you replicate what you did in 2023, like the fans are going to be fans and they're going to be upset with the play on the field. But I do think that they can insert him back into the locker room, into the starting quarterback position, because like if Dillon Gabriel can't get the job done, you still have a lot of veterans on this team that are going to be looking at their coaches being like, well, what are we doing? It's only week 5. And, you know, Denzel Ward, Myles Garrett, David Njoku, Joel Bitonio, like those are the ones that come to mind. Like they don't really want to play in a lost season. And to date, the only thing the Browns have told you is that they feel like Shedeur Sanders is not ready to go.
Right.
So like until they change that tune, then the possibility of it being Flacco or even potentially Deshaun Watson is going to be there, because that's a layer of it to monitor too tomorrow. And like that's going to be a follow-up that's going to be asked if they name Dillon Gabriel the starting quarterback.
Who's the backup? Yeah. I think I'm assuming it'll be Flacco. And that's probably the path of least resistance too, because
to be honest though, that's gonna shake up the fan base again, like because like there's a big subsection of people that just want to see Shedeur Sanders play.
For sure.
Like whether they're not even
Shedeur, frankly,
whether they're not even like real Cleveland Browns fans, like maybe it's some of the Colorado contingency that came over that are now following the Browns and watching the Browns and consuming Browns content. People just want to see Shedeur. Yeah. And the one thing that those people have that I have no rebuttal for is the fact that, well, what's the point? Why not? You know, like it's a season where you're not going to the playoff anyway. You might as well see what the kid can do. I know the Browns' answer would be that they feel like he's not ready and they're going to continue to develop him behind the scenes and all that. But I think going from Gabriel back to Flacco at some point would really turn off a lot of people.
Well, like here's the thing. You can get away with this week being like Gabriel's our starter and Flacco's going to go to be the backup. Like you can get away with that part of it for now because it's basically just swapping the two at the top of the depth chart anyway and being like, yeah, Shedeur's still going to develop whatever. He's going to be our emergency third string quarterback per usual. If you get later in the season, though, and Gabriel, let's just say Gabriel takes over here week 5, where this is all assuming, right? Because we're starting to hear some things, but with nothing confirmed just yet. If he takes over week 5 this week, and let's say he plays, I don't even want to do like a specific number because I know I'll do the math wrong on it. Let's just say he starts until week 13. We'll say week 13. If then if then they decide like, all right,
that takes you to Browns Titans, by the way, on December 7th.
Okay, which honestly, that would be the perfect game to put Shedeur out there and have it be Cam Ward versus Shedeur Sanders. Oh, ratings goldmine for the NFL. They can flex that game into Thursday Night Football or something, and everyone will eat it up, even though those teams are probably going to be playing for a draft pick at that point. But anyway, if the decision ended up being at that point in the season, like, yeah, let's go back to Joe Flacco. And even if it was like 3 games before that, I'm just theoretically, like maybe Dillon Gabriel comes out, they win a couple games, they're like around 500, and then like even earlier in the season they decide it's time to go back to Flacco because maybe Dillon starts struggling. They're like, well, we're still trying to win some games, we're still in the hunt, quote unquote, we're not mathematically eliminated, so let's go back to Flacco. I think that would be like the biggest sign ever that this team just has no intention of like really giving Shedeur Sanders a chance to play this year, and that they really think he's so far behind the 8 ball that he's not even capable. That would be a huge thing, as far like you alluded to, from the Shedeur Sanders standpoint of things. Like if the natural progression doesn't go, Flacco gets benched, you go to Gabriel, okay, then you go to Shedeur. I mean, people will be up in arms about that, and part of that's just fans because fans are already ready to move on to the next thing. Once they've seen Flacco, they're done with them. They don't want to go back to Flacco, obviously. But you're right. If it ended up being a progression of Gabriel back to Flacco before you see Shedeur, people would absolutely lose their minds about why they're making that decision and like if they're really the Browns are holding him back conversation, which I thought was ridiculous during the preseason. That would actually have some merit if they did it that way.
Well, you mentioned the fact that the fans are always looking to turn the page and go to the other guy. Like we've got a minute until this bye week. Like I know this kind of feels like a little bit of a different week because the team's going to London. They leave tomorrow after practice. So this week feels a little bit different. But then after that, like is usually when you get a bye week. No, NFL schedule makers do the Browns no favors. Dillon Gabriel, assuming he starts and gets through the Minnesota game, is going to have to go to Pittsburgh, a place where the Browns
off of a bye, by the way. Pittsburgh has a bye.
Pittsburgh has a bye. So like you haven't won in Pittsburgh in so long. That's going to be a very difficult game. Then you're back in Cleveland against the Miami Dolphins before you get your bye week, and then you go to Foxborough to play the Patriots. Like if they go 0-3 in this stretch, people will be calling for Shedeur Sanders during the bye week.
It's going to happen quick. And you're right, the bye week would be, quote unquote, the perfect, I'm doing air quotes here, time to make that quarterback change again, or even if it was Dillon at the time. Like that's the time people I think projected initially they might do it.